Hey guys, Matt Marzillo here. In this video, we're going to be going over an Excel function called Vlookup. Several weeks back, I mentioned that pivot tables were the most useful, or was the most useful tool in Microsoft Excel. A close second behind the pivot table is the Vlookup function. It allows for you to pull information over from a reference sheet or a reference workbook into your working sheet. And I think the best way to present this information is to quickly go over an example, show you how it works, then touch more specifically on the different arguments within the Vlookup function, and then do the example one more time just to reinforce it. So first, let's quickly go over an example, right? So the sheet we're looking at right here is a list of employees, and it's for a travel, right? So we want to understand, we want to know what their seat preference is when they're traveling on an airplane, right? Do they want an aisle or a window seat? So we don't have that in this sheet, but if you go down here, there is a reference sheet that also contains the full name of each employee and their seat preference. These two columns for hours and rate really don't matter for this exercise. They're just kind of there. So essentially what we're looking to do is we're looking to bring over the seat preference from looking at the full name of each employee. And this is the perfect application, or the perfect opportunity to apply the Vlookup function. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here to cell I2. We're going to type equals Vlookup, and the V stands for vertical. And there's 4 different arguments that we have to plug into the formula. The first is a lookup value, and that's going to be the full name, the name of the person. So we want to know what Andrea Abrams' seat preference is. So let's click on C2. We could also type in her name instead of the cell reference, but in my experience, I've always used the cell reference. So we're going to click comma, and now it's asking for table array. This is essentially a range. So you're always going to go to the reference sheet for the second argument, and you're going to click on the column headers. You're going to left click, hold, and go 1, 2, 3, 4 columns over. Type comma, and then you're going to type in the column index. And what that's saying is that how many columns over from the leftmost column of the array or the range do you want to pull information from, right? So if we were looking to bring over the rate, we type 3. If we were looking to bring over the hours, we type 2. But we're not. We're looking to bring over the seat preference, so we'll type 4. Comma, and this last argument is always going to be false. The false is telling Microsoft Excel we want an exact match. We don't want to worry about an approximate match. And for the sake of this course, you're always going to use false for that final argument of the Vlookup. Hit enter. It brings us back to our working sheet, and there you go. It's what this is telling us, what Microsoft Excel is telling us, is that because we're referencing the cell C2, it's telling us that Andrea Abrams, her name exists somewhere in column D of the reference sheet. And because of that, well, or when her name exists, 4 columns immediately to the right, the word aisle appears. And that's what it's pulling over. And you can drag this down, and we'll have the relative cell referencing in Excel, right? So instead of referencing C2, it's referencing C3 and C4, so on and so forth. And it's always bringing over that column that's 4 over. Now let's take a look at the actual syntax of this function. Right, so we're always going to have a lookup value. That's always going to be a cell address in our working document, our working sheet. And then we're going to have a lookup range, and the range and the index, that's sort of the that's all connected to the reference table that we're looking at. And the important part you want to remember here is that the leftmost column of the range, that must contain the values that are equal to the lookup value, right? So you want to make sure, so when we just did it, we wanted to make sure that the leftmost column of the range is going to contain the employee's name. And then you pull that range over for however many columns you want to pull over, and then you would simply type in the index to say, okay, Excel, pull over the information. So when Andrea's name exists, pull over the information that's 4 columns over from Andrea's name. And that's how it pulled over the seat preference. That's the index. That's what the index tells us. And true or false, like I said, that's telling Excel, do we want an approximate match or an exact match? In my career, in my life, I've only used false. False is telling Microsoft Excel we want an exact match. Okay, so that's the way the VLOOKUP function or formula is set up. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Maybe write it down. You can go ahead and pause right now if you want to take a look at that. It's a really important, powerful tool in Microsoft Excel. Let's go back to the employee sheet, and we'll do this one more time, right? So let's delete out this information here. So we're going to go equals VLOOKUP. We're going to do a lookup value of C2, right? And this is sort of our connecting value. That's our first argument. Then we're going to go down to the reference sheet, and we're going to select our range or our table array. Excel calls it a table array. It's a range. And we're going to make sure that we're going to select. We're always going to work with column headers when we're doing a VLOOKUP. It's always going to be dragging over column headers. And our leftmost column header must contain the information that's in our lookup value C2, and that's full name. So we'll left click, hold, bring it over. The first column is 1, 2, 3, 4. That's our table array or our range. Next is our index. We know that's 4, right? We want to bring over the information that's 4 columns over from our lookup value. And then our next argument is false. So before I click enter, I want to touch on this index one more time. If we typed in 3, what the VLOOKUP would return would be the rate, right? Because the rate is 3 columns over from the leftmost column. But we don't want that. We want 4. We want the seat preference. But just for the sake of showing you, if I typed in 3, it's going to pull over the rate information. Click enter. You can see it does that, right? This isn't telling us Andrea Abrams' seat preference. It's telling her rate, because the rate is 3 columns over from the full name in our range, right? And if I typed in 2, these are her hours, right? She worked 80 hours in this time period, but we don't want that. We want 4 for seat preference. There you go. And you can pull it down. You're never really going to want to, or I caution you to ever pull this formula left to right or horizontally. Always pull it vertically, pull it up and down. That way the cell referencing works well, because it's just going to change the row of your lookup value as opposed to changing the column. It's not going to work if you try to do that. So just always pull the VLOOKUP function or formula. Always pull that vertically. Another thing, so for all your homework assignments, you have to leave the formula in here, right? I want to see that it says VLOOKUP up here. But when you're in the working world, it's always important to remember to copy and paste the values down. Because if you leave a lot of VLOOKUPs in an Excel file, it starts to become rather large, and it's costly, right? It's gonna take a few minutes to possibly open up an Excel file. So when possible, when you're out there in the real world and you're working, make sure to copy and paste the values down after you've done the VLOOKUP and you have the information you want. Okay, guys, that's VLOOKUPs. I know it's a little bit tricky. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to post a question to the class forum, or give me a call or shoot me an email. Thanks a lot.